Cool. We are now live.
Good morning.
Awesome. Well, could you introduce yourself a little bit? And then I think what I would like to kind of get into first is the project with Parleys, just to kind of like give people that little hook into what we'll talk about, and then kind of go back to your background and kind of how you got into the outdoor industry as a whole.
Sure. My name is Loren, Gwartney-Gibbs, and I work for Adidas Outdoor. And I've been in the outdoor industry, I think you could say probably since I was born. Both my parents were mountain rescue, and I grew up spending time in the backcountry. And I specifically in the outdoor industry as a buyer or sales representative. I've been doing that since the mid 2000s. And now I work for Adidas Outdoor. I manage national accounts, key accounts, and that's my role at this point.
Awesome. Cool. Well, it's great to see you again. I know it's been a while. Obviously, we met at OR, and that was a bit ago. But could you talk about a little bit about that Parleys project that Adidas did, and just that's kind of, I guess, where we'll start.
Yeah, so it's really just kicking off at this point. Parley is a company that is really dedicated to raising awareness for the beauty and the fragility that our oceans and of our oceans, and really to collaborate on projects with different companies and brands, just about really raising awareness. And what they do is they have begun picking up plastic off of beaches. And if you go to the Adidas website or you go to YouTube, you can dive in a little deeper on, or even Parley for the Oceans website. You can dive in a little deeper on what they do. But what we're doing right now, what we launched for fall of 16, is the Adidas brand launched their first shoe that's using ocean fish nets, and we take the plastic that's usable from those fish nets and bottles that you can collect off beaches. We're specifically, it's in Malaysia that we're doing ours, but we take that and then we make it into a fiber, and then we make our first shoe out of it. Now, not the entire shoe is made out of this fiber. We use recycled products on the rest of it, except for the Boost midsole. But it is the start of what we see as a good way for us to raise awareness about this. The products aren't cheap when they go to market, but the idea is for just to get the conversation started. And I think when you travel to some places in this world, you can really see how much plastic ends up in our ocean. And all you need to do is go to some remote beaches that don't get cleaned next to your resort on a daily basis in order to find that. And I think Southeast Asia is a good example of that, and that's where Parley is focused their energies right now. There is talk and an effort about expanding to different parts of the world to collect plastics off different beaches. I mean, it's certainly not exclusive to Southeast Asia, but that is where it started, and that's where we are getting that product currently. When you look into 2017, you'll be seeing apparel made out of this fiber. You'll be seeing different footwear products made out of this fiber. So really the sky's the limit. It's all about finding, the plastic that we can use. Not all of it's usable. A lot of it's been sitting in the sun for a long period of time. So we have to find other ways of, using that product. And that's always challenging. But right now, the usable product is being made into a fiber so that we can make different products and go to market with those.
What's really cool about that too, and as you mentioned a little bit, is that was kind of like one of the vehicles that I think Adidas has been using to kind of pull people in a little bit and kind of start that conversation. And I thought that was very telling, because that was exactly what brought me in the first place. Is we had a rep come in and talk to us about a lot of the sustainability efforts, just on the very surface level that Adidas was involved with. And I know I personally have tried to have a foot or a kind of a handhold in the industry for a while, granted not as long as you have, but I didn't know anything about any of the sustainability efforts behind Adidas. And I think it was just super cool that that was one of the ways that that was how the company as a whole was kind of bringing people into that conversation.
Yeah, I think, sometimes in this day and age, it's pretty easy to not dive deeply into, looking at, how you go about purchasing your products. And, a lot of people, don't spend the time to do the research these days, but Adidas certainly has been a leader in, just really long-term investments on sustainability. And I think when you look at, and again, I recommend if people are interested, just Google Adidas sustainability, go to our website. You can learn about, what our strategy is, our statement, our past success. We have been in the top 10 of the Global 100 Index on sustainability for the third consecutive time, just this last January. And we've been in the top 15 since 2005. And that's the largest data-driven sustainability index in the world. It's the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. So, it's most people don't do the research. I'll tell you, before I started working for the company, I didn't either. And it's just one of those things where we think we know what we're buying is coming from good sources, and a lot of times it is. But you just sometimes got to dive a little deeper, and you can learn a lot. And I certainly did. But it's been a lot of fun. It's a great company to work for, and we're excited about where we're going. Especially Parley is a really, really cool thing, and I get to get my hands on my first pair next week. So really exciting on that end.
Awesome. Real quick, are they still doing that competition to give away a free pair of shoes in relation to that project, or?
That's a good question. I know our first shoes in the outdoor division, which is where I am, is for spring 17. I believe they are still giving away, I think it was 50 pairs in North America. It might have been 200. But I would recommend people, it's not in the outdoor division that they're doing that. So that's not going to be my forte, but I would recommend if people are interested in it to go for it. I can tell you that we will be going to market in spring 17 with our first boat shoe made out of ocean plastic. If you know the Adidas Outdoor brand, our boat shoes, for whether you're stand-up paddle boarding or whether you're going to Lake Powell or sailing, things like that, they're extremely popular. And we have our first knit upper out of ocean plastic boat shoe coming for spring 17. So that's really exciting. We're really, and that's what I get to see next week.
Sounds really cool. So if we could back up just a little bit, I think the other side of kind of what I want this podcast to be is giving people a better understanding of like the journey of being in the outdoor space, and kind of the steps that people take to end up getting where they are, because I think it's kind of the outdoor space is less open about that sort of thing. And so I think it would be cool just to kind of get a little bit more of your background, how you started, how you got into Adidas, and then how that kind of ended up leading a little bit more into the sustainability side of things, and kind of like how that plays a role in your work and life in general.
Sure. When I was a kid, I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, and nice, small, not too small, not too big town. But my parents were very active in the outdoors, and they took us on a lot of trips, a lot of traveling, a lot of backpacking in the Sierras or the Cascades. And when I finished my undergraduate degree, I moved back to Eugene, and I was a teacher. And as much as I loved teaching, I did not. I came to realize that it probably wasn't the career for me long term. So I walked into my local outdoor store and said, hey, I'm looking for a job. I just finished 2 months on the Pacific Crest Trail, and just said, you know what, hey, I'm looking for a job. And so they saw my experience with my family traveling and hiking. Climbing has always been my big thing. I was on the junior national team as a kid. I was kind of the first generation of gym rats. I was one of the first members of my climbing gym. And so she saw that and was looking for a buyer at the time. I didn't even know what the word meant. What's a buyer? And I just had no experience in this industry. And so kind of dove in head first and went to my first OR show and was, I think where a lot of people are when they go to their first OR, they're just kind of wide-eyed and like, wow, now this is a gear store. So, yeah, and I mean, from there, I took another position as floor manager and as the climbing buyer up at the Ute Mountaineer in Aspen, Colorado. And then from there, I did that for 4 years. Another great shop. And then I moved to the wholesale side and I became an independent rep. I worked for or with Gary and his team in the Rockies for 4 years. And we started working for Adidas, and I was ready for another change, and they were looking for a manager for key accounts. And really, I think every step for me was just, an opportunity to keep learning. I think if I had stayed where I was, I would continue to learn, but I was really kind of excited for that next challenge. And it seemed like every time I changed, it was almost in these 4-year increments. And that's kind of where it landed me now. I've been working directly for Adidas Outdoor now for just about a year. And but I've been with the brand as an independent rep and as a key account manager for about 5 years.
Cool. And I think that brings up another quick point. Across the world, it's pronounced Adidas, and here in America, we suck, so we end up calling it Adidas. And that's based on the founder's name, correct?
It is Adolf Dassler, Adidas. Back in 1947, that's when they created the name Adidas and it's Adidas AG. But yeah, the Adidas group is how you pronounce it. Most people don't realize that Puma was actually, is the brother, and they actually called that company something else when they first launched as well. But yes, it is pronounced Adidas on the global side in America. We have always called it Adidas. Fortunately, they don't look down on us too much when we do say Adidas. But yes, you are correct.
Awesome. Okay, so then moving kind of a little bit past that experience that you just talked about, how did sustainability kind of end up coming up, and like what is your role in that side of things with Adidas?
So, I think one thing that you can really kind of say, I mean, for me especially, growing up in a family that I think has always taught their children and always felt that they wanted to live a life where, you recycle the things when, you want to recycle, or you have the opportunity to recycle things. You don't buy more than you need. You don't, I think some people are raised that way, and I was fortunate enough to have a family that was just, you don't need a whole lot of extra. And, when you have the opportunity to pick up trash while you're backpacking or, on a hike in the evening, I think one thing I always remember as a kid is my parents were always like, obviously you're never going to litter, but you always take something out with you, and you always take out more than you come in with. And that was something I think my father, either my father or my mother, I don't want to give either the credit for that one, but I certainly remember that conversation. I remember my parents picking up trash as a kid. And so I think when you take that and move into the professional life, I think with that in mind, you want the companies that you work for to have that same ethos, to have that same, desire to be, good stewards of the environment and good stewards of their people. And, when you look at a brand like, Adidas, and you look at the entire supply chain, it is managing the entire supply chain in a way that is I mean, obviously we use the word sustainable, but that really is the right word. It's sustainable. It's a long-term investment to make sure that things are done correctly so that your business is successful over the long term. And, Adidas has been extremely innovative on different ways of reducing water, removing long chain PFCs, which we completely did in 2014. Those type of things, and that's really, I think, when I look at who I work for and the people that I work with, that really just makes you feel good. And that's something that I think for myself, I want to feel good about the brand that I work for, that they're doing the right thing. They're invested in this long term. And, we can, show you, oh, hey, top 3 last 3 years, top 15 last 15 years. But really in the end, you see it in the products that we go to market with. When we're starting to go to market with shirts that use 0 water in the dyeing of those products, we're actually using a gas to dye products now. So those type of things, it makes you feel good, and it makes you feel like, hey, if we're not doing 100% of our products this way, we're at least getting the ball rolling on how do we make things better, how do we make this business and the business sustainable long term. Because we know that as we grow, we are the fastest growing athletic brand in the United States. As we grow, how do we manage that and take care of both our people and the environment throughout the supply chain?
I think the thing that's hard for a lot of people to kind of wrap their heads around, that might not necessarily understand business from the inside, is that is an iterative process, and that you can't expect, especially a company with a global footprint like Adidas, to just all of a sudden turn around 360 and make the perfect system to create something that's sustainable. It happens in steps. And what I think is really awesome, and one of the things that kind of blew my mind and what you had just touched on a little bit, was that process that you had mentioned with the gas dyeing. Could you talk a little bit more about that and kind of like why that ended up being more of like an innovative process?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that we're the only ones doing it or the only ones trying it. We have a few different ways of that we're trying to scale on a large scale. Economies of scale, of course, but it's not always easy to say, hey, we came up with this new process, we're going to do it for everything. That always is a challenge. But right now we have 2 different dyeing processes that we're working on making a larger, I would say we're trying to make it easier to do so that we can do it more throughout the line of products. So there's what's called dope dye and what we call dry dye. So dry dye is what I refer to, where we use a gas. We put dye into a gas form, and that's how we dye the products. And then we also have what's called dope dye. And dope dye is actually dyeing the pellets of synthetic before you extrude it through the mold to make the fiber. So again, removing wastewater from the process of dyeing the fiber. So those are really, I would say, probably the 2 that I'm aware of that we are currently manufacturing products with. We are trying to do it on a larger scale. It's challenging. But I think when you just look at, coming up with new ideas, coming up with new methods of doing these things, that's where Adidas has always led, whether we're talking about running shoe technology, about apparel technology. It's always just being creative, listening to other people when they've got ideas on, hey, I've got this new idea for a manufacturing process, and bringing them in and trying to make it work. And I think that's what you see. We launched our first dry dye shirt, I think it was for spring 15 or spring 16. And I mean, just that whole idea of 0 water being used in the dyeing of a t-shirt. I mean, when you look at all the different t-shirts that are out there and all the wastewater that goes into that, water is and you look at Parley also, water is a big issue. And when you look at the manufacturing process of garments and one of the largest. I know there are other companies out there that are reducing their the amount of water they use as well. So again, kudos to them, because everybody needs to do what they can. And I know it's definitely a long-term investment in the Adidas model.
So you touched on it a little bit there too. What kind of challenges have you come across, either whether that's your own life or as it relates to the business, in kind of trying to push forward some of these initiatives that in a lot of other companies, I think would just be kind of cast aside and not really looked at as a priority?
I think for me personally, I mean, I can't really speak necessarily to what I don't necessarily have anything per se. What I would say is, from an Adidas brand perspective, is these are not inexpensive projects, and they are certainly more expensive to produce than if you go through your regular supply chain methods. Those methods of production have been, we've everybody's been doing it for 50, 100 plus years. So the machines are there. It's easy to do if you want to just do it. When you're talking about new technologies and new ways of manufacturing, the price goes up. When you look at the new boat shoe, our boat shoe generally sells for around $80, $70 to $80. Our Parley boat shoe is 140, and that's a big jump. The Parley Ultra Boost, which is the launch for this fall from the global brand, I believe that's at 200. That's a little bit more than what the classic Ultra Boost is. But again, I think one of the big challenges is going to be is, will the consumer invest in these type of products the way that they invest in a more expensive car that doesn't use gas? Like they're willing to pay, an extra $10,000 for a Prius than they are for, a Yaris, also from Toyota. But are they willing to do that on a smaller scale when it comes to shirts or footwear or, other garments that, brands are investing in trying to change the way that we go about these things? So, I think it'll take time, and it'll also take time for us to do this on a large enough scale that the costs come down. But I think you got to start somewhere. Somebody's got to start somewhere and try to make a difference. Try to just get the conversation started. Why isn't everybody else doing it? And I think the outdoor industry is unique. I think there's a lot of brands out there that really do care and are making significant investments. I could probably list off a half dozen that I've always respected in the outdoor industry. I think when you look at the broader industry, I was in the fashion industry for a little while as an independent rep, and it's just done differently, and it is done, it's not the first thing off the top of their mind. In the outdoor industry, the whole idea is to get people out using these products in the outdoors. And if you don't have the outdoors, well, then why are we making products for the outdoors? And so I think sustainability, just the environment, has always been, at least in the bloodline of outdoor people, is we have to take care of this, otherwise we won't have it. And so, I think that's a unique thing in the outdoor industry, and I certainly appreciate working in it.
Definitely. I'm trying to get the lights to turn back on here. I wasn't moving around enough. And I think you had mentioned there a little bit, just how difficult it is with some of these materials to actually get the process to kind of work the way that you need it or want it to. As you mentioned with the Parleys shoe, how the sun can deteriorate that plastic to the point where it's almost unusable. And I think that's not necessarily always something that is in people's minds when they think about the recycling or reuse process, is that a lot of that material just straight up can't be used again in the way that you would necessarily need it to be.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's I certainly can't speak for Parley or for us when it comes to exactly the struggles we are facing there. But I have, it is my understanding that, when plastic is in the ocean for, 5, 10 plus years, by the time it may hit a beach from somebody tossing it off their boat, or, off their beach, the sun does damage it. And, as much as gets collected off the beach. Not all of it is usable, but I think you take what you can use, and the big question is I think in the future is how do you maximize that, and how do you maximize every little bit that you're pulling out. So I think those are big questions for the future. But yeah, I mean, those will be struggles that you deal with when you're recycling products. And I don't think it's just ocean plastic. I think it's when you're recycling all products. I mean, there's plenty of people that throw their fleece from the 1970s in the recycle bin, and a company gets their hand on it and wants to reuse the plastic, and in the end it's already been in the market for 40 years. It's synthetic materials naturally degrade on their own, and it just takes time. That's why you should replace your climbing rope every 3 to 5 years, regardless if you're using it or not. But that's just kind of the nature of synthetic materials. They do degrade on their own, and even if it's not sitting in the sun, but it's even more challenging if it is coming out of the sun. So
I think it was interesting too that you had kind of mentioned the fact that it's not really recycling in the outdoor industry or the clothing space in general is not really something that has come full circle yet. And there are definitely those companies that have kind of made it their business to market themselves on that platform of sustainability. And I think that's kind of like the outlier that helps start to funnel people into that idea and understanding of how this is done, and that it needs to be more of a mainstream thing. Is there anything, like, in your personal opinion, that you think the industry will either kind of tip toward in the future, or like things that will kind of help move that balance toward being more of a mainstream idea and something that consumers are looking for in product when they're actually going to buy?
I think, I'll use Patagonia as a great example of a company that has made huge strides and efforts to not only include organic products, recycled products in what they do, but also marketing it really well and telling their story. And I think, one thing that we at Adidas have always said is, we're not focused on marketing our sustainability story. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And when I first asked that question, that was the answer. Like, wow, we are doing all these incredible things, guys. Why aren't we talking about it? Why aren't we telling this story? And it's because our story is, we make products for athletes, and we make products that are the best performing products that we know how to make. And, over time, I think they've realized that, we are really leaders in this, and it is okay to tell that story. And I think our connection with Parley and has started that conversation a little farther outside the box than we maybe were used to beforehand. This is not something that we're new to. It's something that we're new to talking about. So, I think from a marketing standpoint, in the end, you want that story to drive people to make changes, because we can make all the changes in the world, but if the consumer doesn't go out and invest in those changes, they won't last. And so really that's where the marketing comes into play is, the consumer needs to invest in that, and invest in your brand and those products that are recycled, or your products that had come with a better cotton. We just exceeded our goal for the year for using better cotton that's not used or that's not grown with pesticides and herbicides, etc. So and there's a lot of companies out there using organic cotton. And, organic cotton right now is really hard to get your hands on. A lot of it comes out of India, but we applaud anybody that goes out there and tries to make a difference. We just hope that the consumer is willing to invest in those, because things won't change unless it comes full circle and the consumer understands. And like I said before, I think Patagonia is a great example of teaching their consumer that this is important, and their consumer has said, we will invest in that. And I think they are, should definitely be applauded for that. I think it's something we can all look up to, and we'll all do it in our own way. And I think Adidas has been doing it for a long time, and I think Parley is because we do footwear and they don't, is a good example. But I think we're really excited about telling our story, and I highly recommend that people dig a little deeper with the brands that they're buying from, and go to their websites, learn about, generally speaking, most transparent brands will talk about what they do on the supply chain level if you dive a little deeper. And I recommend doing that. You can certainly go to Adidas Sustainability on the Adidas Group website. And there you can download last year's report. You can look at 11, 12 years of of success that we've had in the short term, and it's worth your while. And I think just getting the conversation started, but really in the end, we need the consumer to invest in it. And I think that the hype that we've seen with the Parley shoes is only going to continue. And then it just gets people talking about, hey, by 2020, it's expected that there's more plastic in the ocean than there are fish. I mean, that is a serious problem. And, it should be a concern for all of us. I don't think that, we're going to pull all that plastic out ourselves, but that conversation needs to start. And I mean, you don't have to look too far to read about the big mass of plastic that sits in the middle of the Pacific. And how do we address this? And if we can get that conversation using, or in collaboration with companies like Parley, I think it is worth our investment. We just ask that you go out and support those brands that do this.
What I think was really amazing too, and one of the reasons why I was kind of more drawn toward Adidas after I had kind of done a little bit more of that digging myself and had a couple different conversations with you, was that your company as a whole has really taken sustainability full circle, in the sense that you're not just thinking about the products that are being made, but what that means as a business moving forward, so that you're not just kind of taking these steps into making this product and then the price goes up, and then getting into a situation where all of a sudden there's no demand for the product, and now you kind of took this huge hit as a company, and long term you can't really help push a new awareness forward if you're not able to actually continue making those products and telling that story yourself. So I thought that was really cool that Adidas as a whole was not just looking at the marketing side of things, but making sure that the whole supply chain made sense, and that as you're starting to sell these products, you're not really telling the story right off the bat, but you're able to, in the future say, look, you've been buying these products this whole time, you just didn't know it. And now, now everyone's kind of already bought in because they're already a part of that.
Yeah, and I think for us, what it's really about is setting goals and trying to meet those goals. And I think anybody's welcome to go download last year's report from 2015 and see where we ended up for our goals for the end of the year. You can look at our goals for 2020 and where we want to get to. But it is a process. It takes time. You can't change things overnight. We're a big company. We produce a lot of goods for the global marketplace, and these things take time. But I think when you look at what is the definition of sustainability, it's a long-term investment in change, in making things better for whether it's your workers at the factory, whether it's from suppliers or different manufacturers that we collaborate with to make our products. It's a long-term investment for the health of the company. We're a public company, we have shareholders, and it's also something that our shareholders can look at and say, this is a company that I want to keep my stock in, or I want to buy more stock in because they are looking long term. There's a future here, and they continue to grow, which we do. I mean, again, like I said once already, we're the fastest growing athletic brand in the United States, and I think you'll just see that hype continue with collaborations with Parley, with us, talking a little bit more about what we do, and also making some absolutely incredible products.
Can you talk a little bit more about the initiatives that were kind of put forward, or the goals that you had mentioned this past year, and then what the upcoming ones are for this coming year?
So, some of our, we call it our way forward. So by 2020, we want a minimum of 20% water savings at all of our strategic suppliers. And that might not seem like a lot, but that's huge. I mean, that is a massive change. Another by 50% water savings by all our apparel material suppliers. I mean, another huge one. So water savings for us, we want 35% water saving per employee at our own sites. So whether we're talking about our offices in Herzo or here in Portland, Oregon, but we're looking at across the board 35% water savings per employee, whether that's investing in better toilets or asking people to not buy bottled water, that kind of stuff. I mean, there's so many different ways of looking at it, but water saving is a big goal. From an innovation material process, our 2020 goal is to achieve 20% waste reduction with our strategic suppliers. We're looking at a 50% waste diversion for owned operations, just to minimize landfill, and then a 75% paper reduction per employee at our own sites. We don't own 100% of our factories, so our strategic suppliers, we have set expectations for them as well. And, we expect them to meet or exceed those. And so, I mean, it's not just putting it on ourselves, but putting it on the people we work with. And that is when we talk about the full supply chain, what we're referring to is it's not just making changes in our own lives, but expecting change in the people that we work with. So by 2030, we expect that reliable water in 2030 would be 40% higher than the estimated supply. For Life on Planet to exist and survive, it needs to be clean water. But the supply is finite, and water is a really, really big part of that, and waste is a really big part of that. Our goal for 2015 was 40% use of better cotton. We achieved 43%. So we are already exceeding our goals in some places. Hopefully we will continue to do that. But we set a lot of goals, and we try to hit those every single year. We're looking at, there's energy savings that we're also investing in. 20% energy saving is our expectation by 2020 for our strategic suppliers. We expect LEED certification for every single new corporate construction project that we do. I could go into, the annual reduction in scope 1 and scope 2 CO2 emissions that are our own expectations at our own sites. But again, this is something that you guys can go onto our website. You can download this report. You can read about what our goals are and what our investments look like. This is not an inexpensive way of doing business. This is a large investment that costs a good amount of money, but it's worth it. And we hold ourselves and our strategic suppliers to high standards, and hopefully we continue to meet and exceed those goals for for the rest of time.
And just based on the couple of things you had mentioned there, I think it's pretty clear that it's not something that Adidas as a company has just started, because when you're involved in that many different levels of a business, to try and make each one of those little sections more sustainable is a very, very large undertaking. And so I think it's just a testament to how long the company has been kind of making that a priority in business. Is there something that had kind of kickstarted that initially that had kind of made that more of a priority? Because I think there's businesses nowadays that I think understand that to a sense, but aren't necessarily taking the steps forward to make that an actual reality. And so I think it's really cool that Adidas is putting that at the forefront and actually setting goals, and not only setting them, but surpassing them in order to kind of keep that momentum going as the years roll on.
That's a good question. I don't think there was a kickoff point. I think knowledge, I think you could even say maybe the internet, on just getting the knowledge out there that, that these type of environmental issues exist. I think, we think that over the last 5 years, there's been significant progress just in integrating sustainability thinking and acting into our core practices. But I don't think there was something that kicked it off. I think it was just more like, I think the global community had come to an agreement that, it's time to act, and everybody needs to do their share. And I think that, it's fair to say in this country, we've been a little slower to act. But I think the Adidas brand has been a little bit more nimble in that sense. Certainly it's not a new thing for us. I think talking about it is a little bit newer. Actually marketing some of this is a little bit newer for us. But I think overall, just being aware of what's going on in the world and what is actually happening, a lot of that you can give credit to just dissemination of information, whether it's through the internet or, your chosen media of the day. But paying attention and, digging a little deeper, like we talked about a couple times, and saying, hey, yes, this is what the headlines tell me, but I'm going to read a little bit more. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper onto what's going on, and, say, where can we as a company do our part? And, how do we make this, a long-term strategy, so that not only what consumers purchase, but what our shareholders, will respect and see as, this is a company with a future, and they are committed to making the world a better place, not just for us as a brand, but for people in general. I don't think a lot of us realize that, what we consume in this country and what goes into the oceans and landfills, we don't necessarily see it the same way somebody on the other side of the world does, because they grew up on a small island in Micronesia, and they've got nothing to do with the consumption of plastic water bottles, yet they show up on their beach every day, so I think you just need to take a larger look at the globe and say, how does my consumption impact, the global environment, marketplace, et cetera. And, I think that, we're doing a better job of integrating it into every part of our business every single year. And, but it's certainly not a new thing for us. It is just, we continue to get better and better. And I think we find new ideas. We see if we can make those work. Parley is a good example of that. Dry dye is a great example of that. Setting goals with better cotton, recycled fabrics. We have goals for all of our recycled synthetic materials as well. So, I think it just comes full circle. And in order for you to be successful in the global marketplace in the 21st century, you have to invest in these type of things. Because eventually, we're going to be at a point in the environment where, it's worse than it already is. But it takes time, it takes a lot of investment, and I think you'll see more and more companies come around. But it takes time, it takes money, but I think in the end, we realize that it does pay off. because the reduction in energy consumption for us as a global brand, that saves us money. And it's not a huge investment, to make all our buildings LEED certified. That's not as big of an investment as you would think these days. But in the long run, it's like I said before, it's like buying a Prius. You don't have to spend money on gas. That's why you spend the $10,000 in the forefront to buy the car, so that you don't have to buy the gas. And it's the same concept here as investing in these processes, so that in the long run, you don't have to put more waste into the environment.
So a couple follow-ups to that. The first being, was there another catalyst other than what you had mentioned with your parents that had kind of like brought that broader scope into you being able to kind of understand where changes were happening on a global scale? Because I think a lot of people, if they're not able to travel necessarily, they don't really see that, or they maybe see it online, and because there's like this screen between them and what's going on, that it doesn't really like elicit that emotional connection that it would if you were actually seeing it, on the beach that's 50 feet away from your house, and you're watching all of this crap wash up onto the beach, and things that kind of hit home a little bit more personally than what people are exposed to on a daily basis.
Let me just tell you a quick story. So 2 weeks ago, I live in Boulder, Colorado now. I certainly consider this a clean town for the most part, a town that's environmentally conscious. Progressive is another probably word that I would use. But I'm also active with the local climbers here, and the Flatirons climbing committee, we did a trash pickup up on Flagstaff Mountain. We call it the Flagstaff Trash Bash. And we spent an hour and a half, literally an hour and a half, collecting trash on Flagstaff Mountain the other day. And the amount of trash that we picked up was unbelievable. I mean, we do this once a year, and it is still, to me, incredible that in this day and age, we are still throwing stuff out our windows of our cars as we're driving, that we're dropping things on the ground. I mean, it's really shocking to me, even in a community like this. You could say, oh, well, it's people coming and visiting and doing all this, and that's not the point. The point is, I think it's still happening. If I was going to say one thing is just get involved somewhere, somehow. If you hear this and you're wondering, well, what can I do? What can't I do? I don't live in a place that they do that kind of thing. Okay, well, start something. It doesn't take much to drive down a country road and see all the trash alongside it. So I think in the end, it's, for me, it's kind of been a collective thing, just over time, certainly with the help of my parents, pointing you in the right direction. I've been fortunate in that. But I think in the end is just staying involved, spending an hour and a half, 2 hours, getting a bunch of friends together and say, hey, we're going to do this. It takes an hour and a half, literally. I mean, we probably collected a half ton of trash. I mean, so you're talking, 1,100 pounds of trash in an hour and a half between 30 people, and that's pretty incredible. I mean, that's a lot of garbage. And it always surprises me, I think how little it takes to really get involved. And I think a lot of people think, I'm just so busy, I just don't have time for this. And it literally takes a very small amount of time to make a difference. And, whether you do it once a month, once a week, once a year, just get involved, make sure that the conversations are happening in your community to, do the little things. If you're a runner, great. And you go to a runner's group once a month, great. Get them to do a trash pickup once a year. Like, hey, why aren't we doing this? We're using the outdoors. Let's do it. If you ride ATVs in the backcountry, awesome. But get involved, get those people, having conversations like, hey, we have an impact too. And, just get the conversation started, learn as much as you can, look to other people for examples, because there's a lot of good examples out there. but make small investments in your own time to make a difference. And I think if collectively we did all of that just a little bit more, you would see a big difference. I mean, I know, when people, I've talked with many friends that have come to the US from different countries and said, your streets are so clean and what have you. And I mean, that's great, but still when I look at our streets, I mean, it's far too often that I'm driving on a highway, especially as an independent rep where I traveled a lot in my car instead of on a plane, where I would say, I cannot believe the amount of trash that I'm seeing on the side of the road. And, I don't think it takes as much as people think to get involved on a small scale, and that just compounds larger. So
I appreciate you bringing that up too, because I think what I focus on with this podcast a lot is more of a broader scope of like, how do I get involved in the outdoor scene? Like how can I progress my career, but also make sure that I'm not negatively affecting other people or the environment as a whole. And I think I kind of get to a point sometimes where I glance over small things like you just mentioned, where it's very easy to just go out and do those things. And I think those little things, like you mentioned, are the things that lead to a greater change in the future and, add up to something bigger than just the small thing that you're doing in that instance. And I've been in similar situations, as you had mentioned, with traveling, where we're out filming and we're on a bunch of different trails in a bunch of different areas, and I see very similar things where there's just trash everywhere. And I do a similar thing where I try and pick up as much as I can, even though we're carrying camera equipment, all this other stuff. And I think it's just, if you're going to be out in those situations using those trails, it only makes sense to kind of exercise some compassion, not only to the environment, but to another human that could be coming in behind you using that same trail, and making sure that you left it better than you found it, because it doesn't make sense to come in and degrade something to the point where someone else can't enjoy it as you had.
Yeah, absolutely. Take out everything you can, and if you have the opportunity to get involved on a larger scale, do it. It doesn't take as much time as you think, and usually there's free food at the end, which is even better. So just takes a couple hours after work, and oftentimes somebody will donate their food as well. So, that's more the merrier.
Definitely. So to kind of keep honing it in a little bit more, can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, the structure of just a shoe in general and what goes into those materials that are being used for those shoes? Because I think a lot of people aren't necessarily exposed to that side of product development. Like, you're Adidas, you make shoes, but I don't think they fully understand the different sections of a shoe, what goes into that process, how it's put together. And then kind of, like looping in that sustainability side of it. I know there's a couple different things that are being done to make those different materials a little bit more sustainable as it relates to the product in general.
Sure. I wish I had the Parley shoe here to show you guys and what recycled materials go into it. I will grab an example of a shoe here and just kind of talk about, how it's constructed, etc. Generally speaking, and I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but this is a trail running shoe from Adidas. It's called the Trailmaker. Launched in fall of 16. It's been very well received. We've had a lot of racers that went over to Europe. A lot of American racers went to Europe and have been running in some of the long distance races. But there's always an outsole in the trail world, generally speaking. In between the outsole and the midsole, which provides the cushioning of a shoe, there's generally some kind of protection plate. You're on rocky terrain, you're on uneven terrain. There's the upper.
For the people that are listening and can't see the video, you're starting from the bottom up. So that would be the bottom of the shoe.
Bottom of the shoe, and then moving upwards. Yep. So outsole, midsole, and then you get into the products in the upper. Generally speaking, you'll see a lot of our products are more minimalistic in terms of the amount of different amount of materials that are used, I would say. There are certain ways of achieving performance without overbuilding a shoe. And I think we're seeing that is using less energy to build a shoe can actually create an equally, if not better performing shoe. rather than using so much energy to build something that doesn't necessarily perform any better. And I think you see that in a lot of our products is they're actually performing better. This is a two-piece upper. So we're actually only using two main pieces of fabric in this upper. You look at a lot of footwear out there right now, and they've got tons of little pieces of overlaid, stitched on, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we're seeing that the shoe breathes better because there's less stitches. It takes less energy to build the shoe because we only are using two main pieces of fabric in the upper. And it actually breathes better because there's less stitch lines. There's more space for moisture vapor to pass through the shoe, keeps your foot drier, more comfortable. But then, so we've got the upper here. Again, yes, a breathable mesh upper. You see a lot of these polyurethane overlays, and then our quick lace system. But this is a shoe that I think you'll see for years. It's definitely been very well received. And it's only $115. Another thing about using less materials is it allows us to use better quality materials or more recycled materials, and the price stays reasonable. I mean, $115 for an extremely high performing trail running shoe is actually on the low end these days of a lot of top end footwear in this category. So certainly like what we're seeing right now.
Awesome. And then I had kind of gotten the lowdown on, and I'm going to butcher whatever this is called here, but they're like little pellets, like little white pellets that are kind of like foamy that I think were used for some portion of the sole.
So Boost.
Boost. Okay.
Yep. So, Adidas has a proprietary technology that is a huge part of our business right now. We actually still can't produce enough to meet market demand. But Boost is a polyurethane. It's an expanded polyurethane midsole. All you got to do is look at what Kanye's gotten on his feet this week. And I guarantee you he's wearing a pair of Boost shoes because we do a big collaboration with Kanye. But it's driven a lot of the sneaker culture out there, and we see a lot of it. I think it's got 3 marathon world records on that midsole technology. I'm sorry, 5 marathon world records. But anyway, it is a expanded polyurethane midsole. It's extremely responsive. It feels extremely smooth and very soft when you're standing on it. But when you're running on it, it's really responsive. It returns a lot of energy to you. And it's probably driving a good portion of our business right now. It is more expensive to use. It's a little bit heavier than EVA is. But I think for me, one of the biggest things is how long it lasts. EVA, which is what most midsole, that's ethyl vinyl acetate. It's what most midsoles are made out of in shoes, especially athletic footwear. And the big drawback of EVA is that it packs out really fast. So packing out is just where the foam compresses to the point where it no longer gives you cushioning. And when it packs out, generally speaking, if you're an athlete and you're a runner, you got to buy a new pair of shoes because your body is not getting the same type of cushioning, especially when you're running on hard surfaces, that you really need to prevent injuries and to perform at a level that you want to. So Boost, we generally see anywhere from 2 to 3 times the amount of longevity out of that midsole. And that's not just a good cost to the consumer, but it's a good investment in the environment. I mean, we're not throwing away 2 extra pairs of shoes for every athlete that we've got wearing our footwear. So it's a little bit more expensive. I would say I don't have one in front of me. Here's for those of you that can see it on the camera, this is the Boost midsole here. This was given to us by the Adidas brand when we sold our first 2 million pairs in the US in the outdoor division, which was exciting.
Awesome.
But this is an example of the Boost midsole in one of our trail running shoes. So a little bit more expensive than your Adiprene EVA shoes here, but worthy if you spend a lot of time in the outdoors and you want to pair of shoes that lasts.
Sweet. So you had kind of mentioned there the trail running shoes. What else is Adidas up to as a whole that you could potentially talk about? Like whether that be with different fabrics, materials, different kind of like product lines coming out. Like where is the brand kind of, putting some more effort in the next year or so?
I think when you look at the outdoor division, especially, which is where I'm at and what I'll talk about, uh, what we're really and the interesting thing is you see it a lot more now, but we've really invested in what is the outdoor athlete and what is that person doing. And I think for decades people have said, I'm a climbing brand or I'm a running brand, and they've all been pretty segmented. When we brought the outdoor brand to the United States, Terex was always the word that was our point of view on outdoor. But our Terex athlete is not just a runner or not just a climber. And I can say that for myself as well. As I don't just climb. I also hike. I backpack. I ski. I do so many different things. I would love to buy one product that worked for most of these things. And although I think most products can translate really well, what Adidas Outdoor has always been really focused on is saying, we want to make sure that they really perform. So we actually test them across, all different sports. Yes, we know that, this works well for climbing, but does it work well for running too? Does it work well as a base or mid layer for skiing? Because we know that our athletes are certainly not just one sport athletes. They do a lot of different sports. And you're really seeing a lot of other brands start to pick up on that and be like, oh, okay, we can talk about that too. And yeah, granted, a lot of products regardless can be used for multi-sports. Really, it's been a focus of ours for almost 10 years since we launched the brand in 2006.
Sweet. And I think what's cool about that too is we had actually seen some similar things in a lot of the work that we were doing. We're actually doing a shoot coming up here in the next couple weeks or so with actually, I think he's an Adidas Outdoor sponsored athlete, Gareth Lee, who's a climber.
Yeah.
We're going to New York, and he actually wrote the guidebook on a lot of the New York bouldering sections. And so it's going to be cool that, to see this dichotomy of city and outdoor, and that you can be someone that's merging these things in ways that aren't necessarily or hasn't necessarily been done before. And I think that's cool because a lot of what we're seeing in both marketing and product as a whole is that people are being more open about the fact that they're interested in other things and that they're not just this one type of human. They enjoy doing different sports and that they don't necessarily kind of like fully connect or relate to one thing, that they are interested in all of these different things. And I think that's really cool that is where Adidas is kind of expanding to as time goes on.
Well, just think about it. Instead of having a closet chocked full of products that you don't use very often, you've got one or two products that can do all 5 of your sports for you. And not only does that save you money, but it also saves the environment. It saves the amount of stuff going in trash. I think it's a really good way of just kind of expanding that idea of, I don't need as much stuff to do everything as I want to do. And if we can build products that take care of that athlete, and that's our goal.
Heck yeah. So is there anything else? Just, I guess we're kind of slowly ramping down a little bit, just because this is kind of like when people start to fall off.
Yeah,
don't
sure.
necessarily listen this long in, but is there anything? Yeah. Is there anything else that you're excited about that you'd like to share before we kind of wrap things up?
I think for me, I would just go back to, asking that, consumers, I speak mostly to buyers. We do plenty of consumer research ourselves, but when I would ask that consumers do their research, and invest in the brands that are making a difference, and go learn, go volunteer, go spend a couple hours, and help do more, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and everybody can do a little bit more, but I think that's what we're trying to do as a brand, is just do a little bit more, and try to be a leader in that sense. And I don't think it takes that much effort to do that. So it's a big investment of ours, but I think on a local level for everybody, spending an hour or two a month, volunteering, it makes big difference, especially if everybody does it.
Agreed. So if people want to go check out a little bit more about what we had talked about here with Adidas, what is the URL that they can go to if they want to check out just the sustainability side of what's going on?
Yeah, it's adidas-group.com, and then it's real easy to click on the header up above. It's sustainability is right in the middle, but you go to the Adidas Group website. You can learn all about it. You can see all the brands that we have under our wing. You can learn more about the group itself. But I highly recommend that you go learn about it, learn about what we're doing, where our investments are, what our successes have been. For the most part, we exceed our expectations, and we are proud of that, and we should be. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There's a lot more coming up. We've set pretty high goals for 2020, but I think if you look at what we achieved for 2015, I think we can meet, if not exceed, those. And yeah, just go learn about it. Go learn about Parley. Parley is a really cool company, and their goal is to get the word out, and go educate yourself, and learn about the amount of plastic we have in our oceans. It's pretty shocking, and we're doing a very little bit to get the conversation started, but they're partnering up with us and others to really get the word out that change needs to happen now. And that start for us happens this fall in the outdoor space. You'll see it for spring 16 on a small level, and it just grows from there.
Do you happen to have the Parleys link on you by chance?
Yeah, I think it's just www.parley, PARLEY.tv. That's where you go, and then you can just click on Parley for the Oceans, and you can kind of scroll through their header as well, learn about the different events, talks that they're doing, and learn about the amount of ocean plastic that's out there.
Great. And then any last shout outs, maybe to mom or dad?
I think I've done enough of that. If they actually do listen to this, thank you, because they certainly have been a guiding force for me. But
cool. Well, it was great to talk to you. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we can follow up again in the future with some more cool innovations.
Yeah, absolutely. Swing by the booth at OR. We'll see you in January.
Awesome. Take it easy, Loren.
All right. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.